Welcome to the Tech Talks podcast. Today I'm joined by Coach Adam Menner. Adam, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, my pleasure. Tell us a bit about yourself, kind of where you're working, where you're from, and anything else you want to share.
Yeah, for sure. So I am the director of performance here at Varsity House Gym. So we're about a 15,000 square foot facility in Orangeburg, New York, which is 10 minutes outside NYC, and also Bergen County. So we got a variety of clientele that we see from adults, but a crap ton of athletes. It's funny is I actually started at Joe DeFranco's training systems in Wyckoff, New Jersey, which was about 5 minutes from my house. And that was when I was playing basketball. So I went there to train for myself. And that was where I got exposed to how to train athletes at the highest level, what it took to actually be an athlete at the highest level. And I think that's really the inception of my love for sports performance training and working with athletes started. And then that kind of progressed me all the way through college, where I played up till my sophomore year, but then I broke my ankle for the second time. So I got hurt. And then that is where I revisited Joe DeFranco's, and I was there for another year, just learning, interning. And then what I wanted to do was work for him for a little bit, but then he went down to Onnit. I'm not sure if you guys know, but
Yep.
he went down to Onnit for a little bit. They packed up shop. He's back here now, but he's doing something completely different. So I think that was really what got ingrained. And then when he went to Onnit, I interned here at Varsity House Gym. And something that was amazing about the place, obviously why I'm still here and a partner in our online business, but it was that the other side of training and coaching was so important. And even for athletes who are listening as well, is that we preach culture, we preach support systems and accountability. And I think that is what a lot of coaches don't seek to learn. A lot of coaches want to be the smartest individuals in the room. That's an important requisite, if you will. But not a lot of coaches think about how important is it to build my interpersonal relationship skills, my emotional intelligence. How do I develop relationships not only with the athletes and the people walking my doors, but the parents, the ADs, and the community? And if you can do that, that will be a great catalyst for success, whether you are a coach or an athlete.
No, man, I 100% agree, right? Like the knowing all the science of training and all that stuff, that's kind of what's going to allow you to become a coach. But if you don't have the soft skills to actually work with people and communicate on that level, like you'll never be successful. And I guess this will lead into another good question that I always like to ask. This is obviously another opportunity for me to learn, but one of the best books that I read that really helped me kind of develop my soft skills was Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew. I don't know if you've ever read that one, but I always like to ask people at the beginning, as we're just kind of talking about stuff here, like what are some of your favorite books and podcasts, blogs, stuff that you like to indulge in to kind of help you level up?
For sure. Nothing in particular, I think, because there's two coins here. So this is kind of how I go about reading and learning is one, I think you should have three categories of learning. So that is personal development for yourself, whatever that could be. Maybe that's like spiritual. Maybe that's just learning about how to develop soft skills like we talked about. You're just really fine tuning your own engine. Number two is going to be business development, and that's more strategies. So that's maybe marketing, sales, building an online website. Maybe that's back-end stuff for your gym or whatever you're going to do. Maybe if you're an athlete and you really want to be a computer programmer. Well, part of that might be reading about computer programming now while you're 14, 15, 16. Imagine by the time you're 18, you could start coding and you could have such a great skill set. The third one is going to be industry related. So for us, that's obviously sports performance, health, neurology, movement, whatever. But here's what I suggest. So you have these three categories because you're reading them at a time. But pick one book of each and dissect that book for about a month or maybe like 2 or 3 weeks and really understand it, read it, write it down, question it, try to implement it into your career, business, or athletic career. And then once you can do that, then you realize what works and what doesn't work. Then you move on. I think a lot of people try to intake too much information, and that kind of, as we all know, causes paralysis by analysis. And the death of moving your needle forward, if you will, is not taking action. So that's kind of how I go about it. If I had to say like one book, though, one book that I just really, really, really enjoyed was probably The Compound Effect by Robert Greene.
Okay.
In that book, he literally just talks about how like every small decision, it's almost like the compounding effect of every single small decision that you make over time amounts to something big. And it's like, imagine if you woke up every morning and you wrote a page, just of like your thoughts. But that you it was like a non-negotiable for you. So like Monday through Saturday, you woke up early, you read and you wrote something. After 6 months, you're going to have almost 100,000 words worth of content just right there. And then that is where you can create and do stuff like that. So that was an awesome book for me. Just connected a lot of dots.
Man, I love the fact that you said that three-pronged approach to education, because that's actually something I stole from you. I was always that kind of shotgun approach, and I was just in like my first couple years. I've always loved reading. I've always loved podcasts. Anything I can do to learn more, I'm about it. That's my passion. But I always had this shotgun approach, and me and you have been chatting back and forth kind of throughout the last 6 or so months, and that was one of the things that when this quarantine started, I was like, you know what? I'm going to steal Adam's approach to how he's going about continuing education. I'm going to pick 3 books. What I do is I set a 20-minute timer on my phone. I start on book 1, and then I set a 5-minute timer, and I summarize everything I read. And then I move on to book 2, and I keep repeating that. It takes me 1 hour and 15 every morning, but honestly, I've been loving it, man. So I appreciate you for sharing that with me a few months ago, because it's really helped me kind of refine my approach in terms of my personal education.
Yeah, and it gives you direction, because then you kind of know like what you want to do when you get up in the morning, versus if you wake up and you're kind of like searching for something, then it could be like 30 minutes go by and then you're on Instagram and you're eating breakfast.
Exactly. All right, man. So before we really kind of start to dive into things a little bit more, another question I love to ask people, again, just trying to learn as much as possible, but what are like 1 to 2 of the biggest mistakes that you see high school athletes making? We're going to focus right on that one age group.
Sure. I think number one, I don't even think there's number 2. Number 1 is no athlete is objective about who they are as an athlete. So what I mean by this is that everybody thinks they're better than they are, or their ceiling or potential might be higher than they are. And as a byproduct of that, they try to train accordingly. And I've seen that lead to athletes getting injured, or I've seen that leading to diminishing returns. Whereas like, if you could be like, all right, am I really going to the NBA? No, but I think I could play D3 ball. Now I'm going to shift my focus a little bit in my training and my mindset and my goals and my resources to that objective. And it's going to be much more attainable versus like, I want to go to the NBA. It's like, yeah, but you're a 6'1", 175-pound athlete that isn't that athletic, but I think you're a great shooter. You could do here.
Yeah.
So I think that is for me what I've seen definitely more so than anything else.
No, that's great. Like I said, I get the opportunity to talk to a bunch of different coaches, work with athletes of all different levels. And I always like to ask that question, especially like with some of my older and professional athletes that I get to work with. I love asking them that question, because for me, it's like, I want to diffuse all these answers and come up with how can I actually help people? Like, what are the real problems that these high school athletes are facing? And then how can I kind of lend my expertise and experience to kind of help them stay on track? So I appreciate the insight there. So you briefly talked about your kind of athletic career and how some injuries came up. Like, walk us through your career as a high school athlete into college, and then when that ended, how was that transition into coaching? And then we'll start to dive in on the meat and potatoes of what you want to talk about today.
Yeah, I think when I was an athlete, when I was younger, I went through these peaks and valleys, if you will. So like when I was super young, like 6th grade, I was developed a little bit more. So I was really good, really fast. And so I didn't really care about like my game as much. So like I would play a lot of recreational basketball, like on the side with like with friends and stuff. And we would compete a little bit. But that allowed me, because my mentality wasn't so like, I have to do this, I have to be the best. I was just naturally better than everybody. And I played a lot. So I had better reference points and I was naturally better. So when I played on the court in like competitive play, I was just better. But then as I started to level out a little bit, my freshman, sophomore year of high school, I saw what I needed in order to do to get to the next level. And then that is where I kind of started to be like getting to practices earlier, watching my nutrition a little bit, making sure that I wasn't doing anything I wasn't supposed to outside of basketball for you athletes. And then from there, what happened is it really started to get competitive. And then I was pretty good again because I put in a lot of work. And so then I leveled off again. And I think looking back, the thing that hurt me the most is that I shouldn't have been either too extreme one way or too extreme the other. I should have just kind of lied somewhere in the middle. And I think that would have just allowed me to go play even like low D1 ball or better D2 ball. But like by the time my senior year of high school rolled around, I was having like a lot of fun in high school. I was really enjoying where I was. I was doing like extracurricular activities. We were doing like cool stuff. Um, and I didn't take basketball seriously. And that's why I ended up playing kind of D3 ball. Whereas there is a balance. But back in like freshman, sophomore year, I was so focused that I completely neglected the other things. And I almost took my sport too seriously that it like hurt me. And I was like just in a bad mental state. And so that led me to coaching, because for coaches or for athletes, we as like coaches love the training side of it. We think that we can go all the time. We need to do 2-a-day trainings. We think we need to do all of those things to reach the next level. But in reality, you need a coach, i.e. ourselves and everyone listening. You need someone to tell you that you need to be held accountable, that you can't do those things. And then our responsibility is to guide them to the right goal. So I think those mistakes allowed me to be a better coach now, to provide true objectivity and just realness, if you will, to the athletes that I'm working with.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like, I think most coaches, you know, we look back and we realize all the mistakes that we made, and that gave us perspective. And now we're trying to just say, hey, listen, you know, I've been there. I've walked in your shoes. I've made those mistakes. Like,
Sure.
let me tell you how this is going to end for you, because I've been there. And I think that's one of the good qualities, or true quality of a good coach, is someone who can really look back and put themselves in the athlete's shoes. All right, man. So I know one of the things that we were talking about, you coming on here and talking about, was kind of speed and overall health for athletes. So um, I think that's one of those things that a lot of athletes miss the boat on. I don't think they really understand what speed training is and what really goes into it. And I know this is, you know, part of your area of expertise. So I'd love for you to kind of share some real, like, tangible advice and how athletes can kind of better their approach in terms of speed training.
Yeah, I think that when I look at speed training, the reason why an athlete should prioritize it, no matter the position, but it's all going to be dependent on a host of variables. But speed training is so important for two reasons. Number one, it is the most demanding, both neurologically and physiologically, exercise that you can do, period, just because of the motor unit recruitment, your output from it, and all the subsequent qualities that happen. But even more so, number one is, I think getting from point A to point B the fastest matters a lot in sport. And where I look at where the game is going in across all sports, the game is so much faster. Whereas in basketball, center position is removed. In football, defensive ends are a lot lighter. Even linemen are not as heavy as they used to be. You look at even like tennis, guys are better athletes. They have more lateral mobility that can be improved by increasing speed. You look at soccer, you look at all the other sports that are happening right now. Speed is such a big component of that. So I think if you prioritize that in a training program, all the other subsequent physical qualities that you're looking for, strength, movement competency, cognitive ability in terms of neurological output, and even conditioning from via the speed reserve, I
Mhm.
think that those are why we here at Varsity House Gym put speed at the forefront.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that, you know, as you cut your teeth in the coaching world, you start to really learn a lot more, right? So I see a lot of young athletes and young coaches thinking, man, if I can just get my squat up and I'll have stronger legs, I'll be able to run faster. And it's like, okay, when you're a complete novice and you've never trained before, no matter what you do, you're going to see general improvements in the other things that you
Sure.
do as an athlete. But when we're talking specifically speed training, like like you said there, that like the contraction speed when you're running, you can't match that anywhere else. The only way you can get those levels of speed achieved is when you're actually running with a
Right.
barbell, with a weight. You can't move, even with the med balls, everything. You cannot replace the stimulus that you're going to get from sprinting. And I think it's really the universal language of all sports. Like you kind of said, there's no sport that you can find where you can't find some iteration of sprinting. And best bang for your buck exercise, I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, I think that is why it is so important, as you mentioned. But also, too, I think that what people don't realize about developing speed, especially with younger athletes, is just all of the neurological functions that happen with it, such as your cognitive ability. Because when you're moving an object through time and space at that maximum velocity, from the brain sense standpoint, especially in younger athletes where they're still developing, those athletes need greater reference points, and I've talked about this in the past in terms of exposure, nature versus nurture. I see a lot of athletes who don't like the weight room, but they play, let's say, basketball for AU organizations, but since they were a little kid, they always played 2 years up. So their body's output was required to be a lot faster, a lot higher. So their reference points in terms of observation of sport, but also internally, kind of raised a little bit. But once they started playing against people their own age, their ceiling was a lot higher. And so those other athletes who didn't prioritize speed or moving at those higher velocities, they were trying to close the gap a little bit as they get older. And we all know that that's a lot harder because the brain, again, it's never truly developed, obviously, but it's a lot harder to imprint and create deeper reference points in an older athlete who's like senior year of high school, college, or even a pro. So I think the earlier you can teach speed, you might not see an immediate return on investment, but you're going to see it much greater down the road. And that's truly what separates the novice athletes, if you will, from more advanced athletes who go on to do bigger and better things.
Man, I think that's awesome right there. Like, hopefully kids are really listening and taking what you're saying into account, because this is gold. This is gold. Another thing, I think, if we're talking about speed, another thing that I think we have to discuss, and one of the things that I think most kids really butcher when they try and do speed training is rest, right? Like, I had a kid, I gave him a speed workout, and I specifically wrote, like, this is your rest, like, make sure you take it. He messages me after, he's like, man, I was almost puking, like, that was the hardest thing ever. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's not speed training, that's conditioning. He's like, well, I took 60 seconds rest in between each rep. I'm like, man, you got to read the fine print in there. Like, I'll take that one as I'll take some ownership on that one. I clearly wasn't clear enough, but rest is vital. If you're going to be training speed, you have to be training speed. You don't turn it into a conditioning session, because you are not going to see the adaptations that you're looking for.
100%, 100%. One thing too that we've noticed here working with a lot of our athletes is that once you get older, that maximum velocity, if you will, that you're trying to achieve is going to be a lot harder. It's like the analogy I use is, think about the weight room. Just like you said, in a younger athlete, I could put a dumbbell in his hand, and every single week for a year, he's going to go up 5 pounds. Essentially.
Yeah.
Barring all the variables stay the same.
Yeah, it's just a linear growth.
For sure. But what happens is that same thing with speed. Like, you can time this kid. He's getting a little bit faster. Hey, let's just work on this. He gets a little bit faster, so forth and so on. But trying to achieve new 1-rep maxes or new personal bests and maximum velocity, whether it's 10, 15 yards, whatever your training parameters are, is like trying to achieve a new 1-rep max in the weight room, where that's just not going to happen week after week. So something that we utilize is called the stress scale. And the stress scale is something that I created based off of some research, but also I wrote about it a few times. And it's just basically a way to manage athletes' outputs in the weight room to align their speed with their strength work. For example, if an athlete comes in, you're not feeling that great. We all know stress is the catalyst for either optimal performance or non-optimal performance. And everything in the body, or all external variables, both physiological and psychological, are experienced the same or processed. So athletes, for listening, if you break up with your girlfriend, if you do a 5x10 squat workout, even though one is CNS fatigue, one is PNS fatigue, they're both processed by the same subsequent response is going to happen, what's called the stress response system. We don't need to know about those. And so that's why we created the stress scale, because so if you came in and you said, how'd you feel? And you're like, I feel great. Well, let's see after we do our warm-ups and stuff and we get into that. And then maybe I'm going to say, hey, today we're going to hit a 5x2 at RP7. And then we're doing our warm-up sets and weights that should feel a lot better, feel worse. Well, traditional maybe strength and conditioning would tell us, we just got to grind through it. You just got to hit these new PRs. But no, you're going to bring it back down here and we're going to operate at a 7, but that might be way less than your percentage guidelines that are usually prescribed. And I say that because in speed, what we try to do, what we found to be super effective, is we're not trying to hit new PRs every week. What we're trying to do is hit the same times repeatedly within training sessions. So if we're doing 10-yard accelerations and athletes are getting 168s on their handheld times, well, maybe they get 168 to 172, but they stay in that range. We do 10-yard sprints, so the average is 170. Mm-hmm. If the following week after they do that, so after the following week, if they do that and they get 169 for 10 yards as their average out of all 10 sprints, I just know that they improved.
Hmm.
versus trying to go for that absolute time where it's like, I need to hit that 161. I need to hit that 162. No, don't think about that one time. Don't think about that one rep max. I want you to be able to get overall your average faster time and time again, because when sport occurs, that is where you're going to really see the benefits of training in that way. So one rep max testing in the weight room and max velocity testing is great, but very seldom do we see PRs. I want averages to improve over time. I know that was lengthy, but
No, man, that was amazing. And you can even tie that back to what you said was your favorite book, The Compound Effect. Like, we're just trying to compound marginal gains over time, and it's not all about these peaks and valleys like you talked about. It's, hey man, like, let's see a steady improvement over time, because that's what's best. And I think to take those two ideas, that example you just shared with us there hits the nail on the head. So that was awesome, man. In terms of speed training for athletes, are there any other like pertinent things that you want to address?
Yeah, I think for athletes, so stuff that you guys can control that we see too is don't do extra outside of the training session that's prescribed for you. And that's a big one. So let's say you train 3 days a week, 4 days a week, but out of those 4 days, you're sprinting 3 times on each of those days. I'm sorry, you're sprinting, 3 out of
Yeah.
the 4
Yep.
with varying intensities. Do not the next day or over the weekend try to go sprint and jump some more just for the sake of sprinting and jumping some more, because now you're going to dip into those stress levels. You're going to be too fatigued, and now you're not going to improve at all. So when you come back and you're working with Andrew and he's saying, hey, your time's going down, it's like, well, why is that? Is it the training? Is it? No, because what's going on outside of the weight room that's impeding your ability to improve here, if we can find the solutions there, that is where you'll see dramatic success. So the actual takeaway is adhere to the training program. And if you want to do something extra, ask your coach first if it aligns with the goal.
Yeah, I love that you addressed that, and I started laughing so hard when you first said that, because it's always like, Coach, I'm not getting the results that I thought I'd be getting coming to train with you. It's like, okay, well, what are the things that you're doing outside of this? Well, I left the gym with you the other day and I wasn't feeling that sore, so I went home and I did another workout, and then the next day I did another workout, and it's like, the reason you're not sore is because that's the goal, right? Like, our goal is not to get sore. Our goal is to, like we said, compound marginal gains over time, and by absolutely destroying your body and getting you as sore as possible every single day, like, that's not conducive to the results that we're trying to get. So trust the process. And like you said, if you want to do extra, come over, ask us, like, let's work together and we'll find a solution. But don't just go all Rambo on your own and try and light the world on fire, because man, you're the one that's going to get burned.
For sure. For sure.
And for any of those, like, maybe if people didn't understand fully, like, that stress, like that stress scale idea that you talked about is so vitally important. And I want to make sure that people really get it. Like, your body cannot differentiate stress. It has no idea if it's training stress, life stress, or if you're getting chased by a tiger. Your body has no idea. So make sure that you're like, our job as coaches, we're really just stress managers. We are systematically trying to, induce stress to elicit a certain adaptation. But you guys got to make sure that you're managing your stress accordingly as well, or else you'll just never get those kind of results. So hopefully you really kind of take home that idea that Adam was talking about there in terms of managing stress and how that fits into the performance puzzle.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. Thanks for pushing that a little bit. If you guys want to read any more about that, it was on a few of them, but the main one that I published it on was Simply Faster. It's called The Stress Scale for Athletes, a new way to monitor athletes' stress. So if you guys,
I'll try and link that in the bio as well. Like, I'll make sure before we wrap up here, I'll give you a chance to kind of shout out all your contact information where people can learn more from you. But I'll try and link all this stuff in the bio so that people can have that right at their fingertips.
yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
And we're talking about stress management and all that kind of stuff, and that really kind of works into the overall health piece for athletes. And this is one of those things that when you're younger, you don't really think about, right? You're just like, I want to go in the gym, I want to kick ass, I want to play sports, I want to kick ass. But like, the best ability is availability. I say that all the time because it's true. And you cannot separate health and performance. And you're just crazy to think that health doesn't matter, overall health and how you manage that. And stress management is a huge part of that. in terms of like specific athletic health, sorry, what are some of the things that athletes you think are probably missing the boat on?
Yeah, I think that, if I had to boil it down, it'd come down to two things, and I'll preface it with this, that traditional strength and conditioning and health and fitness, provides poor context for both coaches and athletes. And you see a ripped guy in Men's Health, or you see a woman who looks really good for female athletes if you're listening on a magazine, and you think that you need to get there in order to display a certain level of health. Or you see a strong man lifting a lot of weight, or an athlete deadlifting a lot of weight. And the problem with that is an external association with what it means to be healthy and look good, right? Because you say, if I was to ask any athlete at face value, I said, hey, do you guys eat really well? No sugars? Do you eat meat at every meal? Yep. Do you get your fiber in? Yep. Do you sleep 8 hours a night? Yep. Do you drink water? Yep. Do you look good? Yep. I'm healthy. But that's an external viewpoint of health. So I say that to say, health, in my opinion, comes down to your ability to get into the right positions and breathe through those positions, because that is going to make that connection with the brain, like you said, that will help put you in that more parasympathetic or relaxed state. Because the more that you live in these bad positions, no matter how you look, you're always going to contribute stress to the body. You're always going to contribute stress to the brain. And here's an example. So if you're listening to this, I want you to stand up. So you're going to stand up, stand tall, but you're going to puff your chest out as far as you can. Keep going, keep going. And eventually you're going to feel your tailbone lengthen a little bit and your hip is going to pull down. And I want you to try to take 5 breaths in that super extended position. And then here's what you'll probably feel. Your hip flexors are going to get really tight. It's going to be hard to get air in your lungs because your ribs are a little out. You're going to feel your hamstrings literally turn off like a light switch. And you're going to put all of that pressure anteriorly. And that position that you are in is where you live 99% of the time, because that is how you run, that is how you jump, that is how you sprint, that is how you lift, and that's probably how you sit too when you're just hanging out a little bit. So what it's my job? My job is to pull you all together. So if you're still standing listening to this, I want you to round your shoulders a little bit. I want you to tuck your chin. I want you to exhale all of your air so you feel your ribs pull down. And then I want you to actually scoop your hips up underneath you and then brace your abs. Now take 5 breaths. You probably have never felt your abs, your hamstrings turn on so much. That position that you are in is healthy. That is where health lives, because we are mitigating all of the things that training does to us by pulling us back together, turning the brain off a little bit, recovering, and then your sleep, your nutrition, and all the other things that you're doing will provide that additional 1% to 2%. But you can't put dysfunction on top of dysfunction. So for me, I think that is what that is. And if you guys want to see some exercises, we could link some stuff as well that we do after. But
yeah, I know you've shared some of that kind of stuff on your page. So like I said, we'll make sure we reference that stuff so people can kind of visualize what you're talking about. But really, really simple, like you said right there, like go through that exercise and you will notice a difference. And it's a continuum, right? Like you said, that position you described with that extreme flexion in those hips rounding forward, that's what we call anterior pelvic tilt, right? And I think that position gets demonized because, like you said, it's not conducive to relaxation. But that is the position that you're going to be most powerful in. You look at sprinters, you look at strong people, that's where they're going to live. What we're trying to do as coaches is we're just trying to help you even out where you live on that continuum. So if you are someone who lives in this extreme extension, this anterior pelvic tilt, and these what we would deem maybe bad positions, I'll throw some air quotes there. If that's where you live, we just want to help you spend some other time on the opposite end of that spectrum, right? And very rarely do you see an athlete specifically, who lives in posterior pelvic tilt, who's in the exact opposite, more like that second position that Adam described. But if we get those athletes, we're just trying to shift them a little bit more into the other side. So our job as coaches is to really just help manage that stress and then kind of see where you're at and help you shift along the spectrum some way, just so that we can get some balance.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, you can't neglect the other ones. They're great. They're great.
100%.
but maybe at the end of a training session, maybe on your off days, you can just do 1 to 3 exercises to help mitigate some of that stuff, and you'll be more than on your way. So it's not like you have to think about throwing everything out, everything that works out the window, but you do need these other things to make sure that you can continue to do those things better.
And that's why we talked about this, right? This is overall health, and that's what we're trying to talk about here. Is if you live on either end of that extreme continuum, that's not a good recipe for health, right?
No.
It's always somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be dead smack in the middle, but somewhere a little closer to the middle is going to be something that's going to help you in the long term.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome, man. And like what he was talking about is, again, backtrack again on the stress topic. This is a big theme here, but this is really what we do as coaches and performance coaches, is we manage stress. So he's talking about this parasympathetic and sympathetic state. And I think for maybe some of the athletes out there that might be listening, what you will hear that referred to as your rest and digest and your fight or flight. That's the response that they kind of teach you about, right? Like when you're in that fight or flight or that sympathetic state, that's when you're wound up, you're in that extension position, you're ready to fight, you're ready to run, you're ready to play sports, okay? When you're in that parasympathetic, that's when you're chilling, your body's relaxed, your breathing's normalized, your posture's a little bit better. Most people live in we live in a sympathetic dominated world, right? Where we're staring at our phones, we're seeing all this crazy stuff going on in the world, especially relevant right now. It's your job to shift into that parasympathetic state, because you're never going to be able to recover unless you shift down that continuum a little bit. So just wanted to really hammer home these points that the stress management is really what we're trying to do here as coaches. And that's really going to be the secret to you seeing any sort of results in performance on the field, in your sport, in the gym, whatever. It's about shifting into that parasympathetic state.
Yeah, and for other athletes who are listening, so I've been very fortunate to work with some pretty high-level NBA guys, and contrarily, I should say, to popular belief, these guys get into those relaxed positions better than anybody else that I've ever seen. Whereas other athletes, you think that more is better. I need to keep filling my cup, filling my cup, filling my cup. And as we alluded to before, that's going to push you further into that state of not being able to recover. But don't think, I think this is important too, especially for athletes, because coaches understand, but guys, less is more, because what we want is for you to be able to repeatedly be able to train, compete, and play, right? I don't want to hit a PR at the expense of my health today. I want to be able to hit better numbers week after week, month after month, year after year. I want to be able to sprint, jump week after week, month after month, year after year. So if that is your objective, if you do want to play in college, if you do want to play professionally, that is why I am such an advocate, maybe sometimes too far, but to keep you healthy, because I want to see you play at that next level, right? You want to see, when you're working with Andrew, you want to trust him that he will deliver you to that next level. So I think that is why we preempted it and put a big emphasis on it.
Yeah, like you said, like the law of diminishing returns are real. And that's like, if you just think that more is better, maybe for a short-term strategy that might help you out, but long-term, that's going to blow up in your face. And really the approach that I've evolved to, and I know this is something that you abide by as well, and you kind of just said it there, is this minimal effective dose. Like we are trying to do, not because we're lazy, because we're intelligent, we're trying to do the least amount of work to get the best return on the investment of time and energy that we're putting forth. And just slapping more work and more weight and all this on top of that, that's not going to serve you in the long run. And that's what your goal should be. Like you said, if you have these goals that you want to achieve, just burning the candle as fast as possible now is not going to serve you in that long term. So although it's exciting and you want to just get after it, you always got to kind of temper yourself and say, okay, how does this fit into this big picture? How is this going to help me in a week from now, in 3 months from now, in 2 years from now? And then make your decisions based on that process.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know about anybody listening, but I love lifting a lot of weight, but I do not like not being able to walk for weeks at a time. So just being able to just move and feel good after training sessions, just to piggyback off what you said, is super important, right? And you'll hit those weights and you'll hit those numbers that you guys are looking for.
Yeah, and please stop using how sore you are as a measure of how effective your workout is. Please, if you learn anything from this, just stop it today.
Sure.
Amazing, man. Well, is there anything else you really want to touch on today?
No, I think that with everything that's just going on, it's hard to not acknowledge it from just a health perspective, obviously bearing COVID-19. So just returning to play and returning to activity, I think that guys, you should abide by these principles even more so, right? So your work capacity is going to be down, your BMR, which is your basic metabolic rate, meaning just how much energy and calories that you guys need, is going to be way lower because you're sitting down a lot more. Your sleep cycles are going to change dramatically as soon as you start training a little bit more. So you're going to be way more tired earlier in the night from what I've seen a little bit. Hydration levels are down. So just making sure that you guys are taking those smaller steps to get back to where you are going to be key. And that goes for everything. That's going to even go for your nutrition. Don't overeat just because now you're training again. Don't oversleep just because you think you need more of it. Just slowly reintroduce the minimum effective dose, and then over time, you guys will be ready and back to where you are.
Yeah, I actually posted like a very mini podcast this morning on that exact topic. I said, like, I've been thinking about this idea a lot lately of what are the mistakes that athletes, not the ones that are training with me, because obviously I'm going to help them in that process, but what are the mistakes that athletes and people are going to make when gyms open back up? And I said, listen, everyone's going to have this sense of urgency, like I need to make up for lost time, or I lost all my gains. We all see those memes on Instagram and stuff. And it's like, hey, if that's your strategy for going back into the gym, that's going to blow up in your face. Be reasonable. Think of all the things that we've talked about in this conversation, and use that as your guiding light over the next 2 months. Like, don't just think it's a week-long process. Oh, I'll take my first week off and then ramp it right back up. It's like, no, slow cook that, small marginal gains, and compound that over time, and that's going to be the real strategy for success.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So before I ask you to kind of shout yourself out and tell people where they can find you, I got a question for you. So who's a guest that I should try and get on this show that myself and the athletes that kind of listen to this could learn from?
Ooh, who is a guest? What do you think is the most pressing? And then maybe I could guide you accordingly. Like, what is an issue or a topic or something?
I think when I talk to the kids or the athletes, I shouldn't say kids necessarily, the things that always come up that people are always interested is speed, jump, strength. Anytime I ask them for questions, what are things you guys want me to talk about? What are the things you want me to talk about? It's always speed, jumping, strength. So I don't know if you have any other people that might want to talk about those topics, but
Yeah,
I'm always trying to connect and reach out with new people, and I thought this would be kind of a cool way to put some other people on my radar.
I would say Jake Tura.
Oh yeah, I've been following Jake for a while. It's actually so 2 weeks back I had Dr. Tommy John on the podcast, and I actually found Dr. Tommy John through following you and Jake. So definitely should try and reach out to Jake. I know he's an absolute stud in the jumping world.
Yeah, no, he does an awesome job. Jake and I talk all the time. He's got some cool stuff coming up. I will not release any of that, but he's working on some cool projects and what have you. So I think he'd be a good one because he makes complex issues very simple, as do we all, but specifically as it pertains to the vertical jump and knee health and what have
Oh
you.
yeah. No, he is really good at diffusing information and making it very simplified, and that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love following him. So I'll definitely try and get in contact with Jake and see if he's interested. In terms of yourself, where can people find you if people are interested with the stuff that you were talking about today? Where can they learn more from you? Where can they connect with you? And then, like I said, I'll link all this stuff into the show notes when I do publish this.
Yeah, so right now you can primarily find me on Instagram, Adam Menner, ADAMMENNER. That's just where I live right now because we're kind of revamping our website entirely, which we're really excited about, where we're going to have a whole media network of podcasts and videos, a lot of long-winded articles and what have you. So we've been working on that the last 2 months, and I'm super excited there. So I post a lot of content on my Instagram for now, but that's going to change probably July 1st, where we're going to do all articles, videos, podcasts, exercise demonstrations. It's going to be pretty sick. So be on the lookout for that. But I guess I would just say Instagram for now.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll make sure that I link that in there. I'll link your stress scale for athletes article from Simply Faster in there as well. And then I'll make sure that when you guys do have this big launch early in July, I'll share that stuff out as best as I can so that people can find new ways to kind of learn and connect with you.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on here so much. I think you really simplified a lot of things that could be complex for athletes. So hopefully they really listen and take all the stuff that you talked about today into consideration and change how they go about things moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And if you guys have any questions, just message me. I answer every single DM. So I try to make sure that I just answer people and point them in the right direction or what have you. So thanks so much for having me, brother.
No worries, man. I can personally attest that Adam will get back to you. That's actually how we first started talking. I just sent him a message because I saw what he was posting. I thought it was cool. I thought, he's another young coach out there in the trenches working. I sent him a message, and here we are about 6 months later. So again, man, really appreciate that. And hopefully people will come and reach out and connect with you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.